also traditional Jewish, Christian, or Muslim. To understand atheist and agnostic as well as...
Hi,
Preston.
Hi, Katie.
We're back with more cults.
Yay.
I forget the order of recording. Are we talking about more cults next episode, or did we already talk about cults last episode?
We're going to talk about more cults next episode.
We're definitely recording these in order right near release time. Yeah, we haven't talked about cults then in a while.
Yeah,
we talked about Jonestown last year, and we obviously did our big episode on cults.
Yeah.
But we're going to hone down into one specific cult today.
Yeah, this one's pretty great.
On today's episode of
The Holy Watermelon Podcast.
This one's pretty great and horrifying.
It's got aliens.
Aliens.
Was the last one we talked about Scientology? Spoiler,
no,
that's also the next one.
No, we talked about Jonestown, in reverse order, Jonestown, Scientology, cults.
Okay.
So we did cults, and then we did an episode on Scientology for some Scientologist holiday that I don't remember. And then we did Jonestown, I think just last year.
I think you're probably right.
And then we're going to talk about Scientology next week, which is super exciting. Or next episode.
Well, we're not just talking about Scientology. We have a special guest.
Yes.
But don't want to give too much away before the release of that.
Perfect. And today we're talking about Heaven's Gate.
Yeah. So, like Scientology, aliens.
Yes. So like Scientology, aliens, a little bit Christian, very new age. But yeah, there are a lot of elements that really did remind me of Scientology. Scientology is obviously fresh in our minds right now, but this was a wild ride.
Yeah, it was pretty great. Should we start at the beginning?
Yes.
All right. So our two founders are Bonnie Lou Nettles and Marshall Herff Applewhite Jr.
Herff is a name we need to bring back.
I love it.
You know what? If you're in my social circle, you know I talk a lot about how people should not name their children. And Herff is a great fucking name.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So Bonnie had a fairly normal upbringing. She was born in Texas to a Christian family. She moved away from religion as she got older, as many often do. And then she became a nurse and got married and had a bunch of kids. I think there was 4.
Yeah. So pretty normal.
Yeah.
Very normal.
And after 20 years of marriage, things started to change because Bonnie had enough time on her own that she could study some really weird stuff. She got into theosophy. I feel like we've touched that.
On what it is, yeah.
We haven't really dived into that yet. We should do that one of these days. She was reading lots of the occult stuff that her parents definitely would have freaked out about. And of course, astrology and seances. Because, let's bring in all of the weird spiritualism stuff.
Yeah, just like a bored, white, suburban woman. And
that's kind of the deal.
I'm probably going to get some flack for that comment, but...
Oh, well.
This sounds very just like bored housewife.
Yeah.
I know she wasn't a housewife. She was a working woman. Not that there's anything wrong with being a housewife, but just a bored, middle-aged woman.
Yeah. She did have some time. And the way she spent it was interesting. Marshall was also a pretty normal fella to begin with. Also from Texas. He had been married, but by the time he met Bonnie, he had been divorced. And he was actually really just looking for a really close platonic friend. His fascination with asceticism was definitely part of the motivation that ended his marriage.
It also gets weirder, but...
It does get weirder. This guy is not looking for a sexual relationship. The fact that he builds this relationship with Bonnie, it could have been a dude. It would have been okay. It would all the same for Marshall.
It was just someone that was buying his shit.
But worse. She was the one getting all the visions and stuff.
That's true. They had the same interests, at least.
They shared a lot of interests.
Their spouses sure didn't. Their poor spouses. Anyway.
So Marshall's dad was a Presbyterian minister, and so he was a little more religious, the son of a preacher.
And he stayed religious longer than Bonnie.
Yeah. But he was also really into the funky stuff as well as regular theology, and had kids of his own as well. Eventually became a minister himself. And then they decided to throw it all away. I'm getting ahead of things.
Well, I mean, they threw the basics away, the comfortable life. And then
And their families.
Yeah, that's what I mean by comfortable life, the basics. And then it gets weirder. So Bonnie and Marshall met in 1972. There is dispute about how they met.
Yeah, we got a few conflicting stories, but that's okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories around how they went. So Marshall was a drama teacher of Nettles' children or Bonnie's children, but there are some stories that said Marshall met Bonnie at the hospital where she worked.
I like the way Applewhite tells the story. He later said that he was visiting a hospitalized friend when Mrs. Nettles entered the room and their eyes locked in a shared recognition of esoteric secrets. You imagine walking into a room and just noticing this person knows something important just by looking at them in their work uniform.
Right. But even that story is weird because one of the ones that I read where he met Bonnie at the hospital is because one of the kids that he was teaching had an accident, not a hospitalized. Yeah. There's no cohesive story.
Yeah.
Bonnie told Marshall that their meeting was foretold by aliens and that she and the aliens had a great work for him to do.
So that's just wild. I love it. It's a great story.
Which one?
I mean,
I like the alien one.
Yeah.
As opposed to the esoteric knowledge of our past.
If we brush off the loose details and just focus on the weird details, we can still make a good story. Boy meets girl. Boy gets instantly obsessed with girl. The girl is like, I got a job for you.
The aliens foretold of your coming. I like that one. So, regardless of how they met, the two became fast friends because of their mutual interest in wooery.
What a great word.
I mean, I like it when it comes to this stuff. Bonnie's husband eventually filed for divorce as the two started spending more and more time together. The two, of course, being Applewhite and
people
Nettles.
were like really suspicious, but everybody insisted, no, they're not being weird. I mean, they were weird, but not sex weird.
Yeah, I mean, if your wife is spending all of her free time with another man, even another person, and ignoring you and your kid,
that puts strain on the relationship.
Regardless of whether it's sexual or not. They did eventually move in together, and but they claim to not have had a sexual relationship. So,
just really, really close platonic friends. You know, nothing wrong with that as long as it's not getting in the way of your other relationships.
Which it did.
It definitely did. Eventually, they opened up the Christian Arts Center, which is mostly a bookstore, but they also hosted classes in there on religion. They had theosophy classes in there. They got into mysticism and, more benign stuff like music and art, too. But
you can picture those music and art classes.
Oh, for sure.
They're still super hippy-dippy.
Oh, yeah. Safe bet.
Incense, crystal.
I feel like they probably would have sold incense. I don't know if they would have had crystals. They weren't that kind of hippy-dippy, but they might have leaned into that.
Well, there is some New Age as they form Heaven's Gate. There's New Age, there's Christianity, and aliens. And that's where it's like even calling it the Christian Art Center when she was foretold by aliens that she was going to meet.
Yeah.
Marshall Applewhite is just weird, right? It's so
Well, I mean, we're in the post Area 51 nonsense where like people are really talking about it. UFOs getting more and more popular. And so just believing that aliens have been here, that was like the thing to believe back then.
Yeah.
And now it's like, yeah, sure, aliens must exist, but the odds of them actually having come here are pretty slim.
Yeah, I mean, I fully believe aliens exist, just numbers.
Right. The universe is too big.
Yeah. Look up at night. Every star is the equivalent of our sun.
Or some of these lights might actually be full-on galaxies really far away too.
Right. And they all got planets floating around them. Let's assume they're all suns.
Sure. Yeah.
They all got planets floating around them. Sure. Maybe thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them, none of the planets are inhabitable. But you can't tell me that one of them is.
Even 1 in a billion, that still leaves a lot of inhabited planets.
Right. So, but I think we would also know there's no way anyone can hide that from.
Right. Well,
Anyway.
We'll brush up against that later on.
All
too.
right. So Bonnie and Marshall officially left their former lives on New Year's Day, 1973.
Very convenient for the calendar business.
Though Marshall was responsible for most of the public speaking, he and Bonnie insisted they were equals for a year.
They did a lot of the wandering salesman business for a little while, mostly around the western states, talking to literally anybody who would listen. They struggled for money because, this way of living isn't great. They would occasionally take odd jobs and did a lot of selling their blood to make ends meet.
Selling blood is problematic.
Is it? That's just a thing you can do in the States. It's illegal here, I think.
Yeah, no, you can only donate blood. It just feels like that you get into like human trafficking at that point. It's like a gateway.
I like to believe that there isn't a farm of children permanently hooked up to IVs, but it seems like we're real close to that happening.
Right. So as much as I would love to get paid for my 4 times a year donation, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So after all of this work that they put in, really not getting a whole lot of return on their efforts, they got their first convert in May of 1974.
Good for them.
It was a friend that they'd been talking to a little bit through the mail for a big chunk of their wanderings. And he finally decided, yeah, I'll join you. And so they had a lot of time in their wandering to just really talk about what it is we're going to concretely teach people. And they put together a decently cohesive doctrine. It got better as years went on.
Mm-hmm.
But they were very sure that their minds were superior to all others, that they had imagined this. I kind of want to compare it to the bridge of Scientology, but it's not a fair comparison. But there's levels of being, and
right.
you want to get all the way up to the level of these aliens that are far superior to us. And so they're above the humans on this bridge, but not where they want to be yet.
Marshall Applewhite was the reincarnated Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that's so wild. So they did start out with some pamphlets alluding to Christ had come back as a Texan, and like made it like some pretty veiled allusions to Marshall being Jesus. But that evolved as years went on. They were a little bit more overt about Marshall being Jesus.
A little bit of apotheosis here.
A little bit. It was more of a... Are you familiar with the phrase walk in? It's this idea that a spirit can just... It's like possession, but it's like not... Yeah, benevolent instead of demonic. And where you just... It walks into an existing body. We've talked about this so many times before. When Jesus left in the book of Acts, the angel said he's going to come back the same way he left. A walk-in, or the reverse, is not how he left.
Yeah. Anyway. So the two, as they're still defining this doctrine, they work together and define their beliefs by throwing Christianity, UFOs, and New Age materials into a blender and hoping for the best.
And they came up with something that they loved.
And 39 other people love too.
Well, before we get to the end of our story, we'll have hundreds of people who have come and gone through this organization.
That's true.
But yeah, spoiler, at the end, it's double digits. One of the great things that they talked about fairly early on, and then talked occasionally in different ways about it as the years went by, was this idea that they were the two witnesses from the Revelation that did their ministry for a short time in Jerusalem before being killed. And you've actually put the scripture reference. You want me to read it?
Sure. When I was researching it, they actually started at 11:1 and went further, but the meat of it was 3 through 6. So that's all I put in because it's quite long. But hit it, Preston.
All right. So this is the Revelation of John talking about future witnesses who are going to die. And I will appoint my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. They are the 2 olive trees and the 2 lampstands, and they stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths and devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. They have power to shut up the heavens so that it will not rain during the time they are prophesying. And they have power to turn the waters into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. So this is a pretty wicked claim to power for these two.
Yeah. Yeah, these aren't just like two regular apostles going around telling the gospel.
Right. So it's important to note that this prophecy about these two witnesses is that this happens while they're in Jerusalem.
Not Texas.
Right. Marshall and Bonnie have made no plans to go to Jerusalem.
They'll never see Jerusalem.
They never will. No. Anyway.
In the summer of 1974, Marshall rented a car in Missouri, and this became a problem when he didn't return it. He was arrested in Texas in August, so Marshall told the cops he had been given divine approval to keep the car as his own, believing that he had paid enough for it. Marshall spent 6 months in jail, which was enough time to abandon his occult, magical ideas in favor of UFOs and evolution.
Oh, what a time. Yep. Sure. I picked up this car at the rental office. Yeah, I'll admit to that. But it's mine now.
Because I'm the Lord. Man, if I just act cuckoo bananas enough, can people just give me free shit?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Right. After Marshall was released from prison, he and Bonnie started advertising events where people would gather to talk about aliens and their aspirations to become aliens, which the two claimed to have already done successfully, calling themselves Guinea and Pig to emphasize they'd already gone through and passed the test. They did this a lot.
Yeah, these weird new names they come up with themselves. We've got a few series, and they're always deliberate pairs. Guinea Pig. I don't want to spoil for later on.
Okay, we'll point them out.
But poor Bonnie being called Pig on her own for a while. That sucks.
I mean, I would definitely prefer Guinea if I had the choice.
Right?
But
it's a raw deal.
And do hers get better? Not really.
No, they don't. So at some point afterwards, the two established a church called the Anonymous Sexaholics Celibate Church. That didn't last very long.
Can we just remind people, because I saw this on Instagram today.
Mm-hmm.
Celibacy and chastity are not the same thing.
Right.
You're not a sexaholic. Well, no, I guess you can be a sexaholic and celibate.
Absolutely you can.
But you cannot be chaste and celibate. Or sorry, chaste and a sexaholic.
I mean, that's...
I guess I fear covered sexaholic.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, alcoholics can be sober, right?
Right. I saw someone say that they were celibate today, and I was like, no, you're using it as chastity. It made me mad.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Celibacy is the commitment to not marry.
Which often goes with chastity if you're in a religious group that doesn't let you have sex unless you're married.
Right.
Just a friendly reminder, because
it
makes Katie angry.
But the name Anonymous Sexaholics Celibate Church is such a great name for a church.
I mean, it's one I would consider going to, so that says a lot.
Well, unfortunately, this is before Google and search engine optimization, but Sexaholic Church, you be getting some hits on Google.
Right?
But yeah, it didn't last very long. Eventually, they switched the name to Human Individual Metamorphosis, focusing on an entirely different part of what they believe in. Human Individual Metamorphosis. Yeah. It's great.
In 1975, they saw massive growth, moving towards 100 followers, and started getting media attention. They started using the names Bo and Peep to illustrate their new roles as shepherds of this growing flock.
Oh yeah, he was Bo, she was Peep.
Peep's better than Pig.
It's better than Pig, but not like a lot better.
No.
Again, I'd rather be Bo.
Yeah.
Like the face of Bo, right, for all our Doctor Who fans out there.
I mean, Bo just feels like a normal name.
It is a reasonably normal name.
Peep,
yeah.
You little peeper. Anyway.
So they were accused of brainwashing as they grew this cult of UFO believers. But Marshall and Bonnie were really and quite openly, only interested in true devotees, having no interest in pressure tactics of any kind that you would see in other danger cults like Scientology or Jonestown or whatever.
None of this like holding information over people or
Yeah. No, they were...
keeping families from each other or, yeah.
The weirdest thing about this very strange cult is that it really does look like Marshall and Bonnie were true believers all the way through to the end. And so they never felt the need to control people or be weirdly possessive about people. Either you believe or you don't, and if you don't, you can leave.
Which is, and again, I don't want to spoil it, but this is where the end feels very different to Jonestown.
Right.
Still sad, but categorically different.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Brainwashing is an interesting thing that I've done more research on lately. And I figure now is as good a time as any to expound on that a little bit. So what brainwashing really is the overinflated idea of controlling the mind to prevent critical thought and prevent the acceptance of new information or ideas, specifically controlling the mind. It turns out there is no real solid evidence to back up that this is even possible.
So not like in Zoolander where he's brainwashed to kill the Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Right.
You can't, it's not, I'm hearing you.
Right.
I'm trying to repackage it. I'm not doing a good job. There's no like sit down, reprogram someone. It's this, I mean, we've talked about bite model before, this incremental change of belief.
Well, and even like you'll see, it's been common enough in a lot of spy adjacent movies with, you've got sleeper agents where you just say this code word and bam, now you have control of them. Totally impossible.
That's literally Zoolander.
Yeah. Okay.
Zoolander is a spy movie.
I've watched, you're right. It's been too long since I've seen Zoolander. The one that I've watched more recently is Argyle.
Oh,
that's a lot of good fun. It's fun.
I really like Henry Cavill, obviously.
Probably, yeah.
Okay, good to know. That's good. Yeah, in Zoolander, they play Relax, the song from the 80s, and then he becomes a full ninja.
So the U.S. Supreme Court and several other courts in the States have actually ruled against literally anybody arguing brainwashing more than once.
Fair.
And there's good reason for that. Because a lot of people like to say, oh, I joined this cult and then I killed a bunch of people. Brainwashing.
I was brainwashed.
It's never worked.
And especially not like, for lack of a better way to phrase it, like you lose your mind over time.
I mean, yeah, you can change your values and whatnot as you collect new information. But as far as brainwashing,
you are still conscious you're killing people. Your ethics have just changed, or your morals have changed because of what people have.
Yeah.
But you've believed it.
Yeah. The only kind of brainwashing that is real is the literal cleansing of gray matter, which is definitely a terminal activity.
Yeah. So what did Heaven's Gate actually believe?
Oh, so they believe in, well, like most groups, a lot of really interesting things.
And not even just cults believe really interesting things. People believe a lot of it.
People in general, yeah.
I went to a mass this week.
Yeah? How was that?
I mean, it was a funeral mass, so it wasn't super fun, but I paid a lot of attention to the moment that the blood in the body were real.
Yeah.
And I'm doing shifty eyes because I didn't believe they were real. But they rang a little bell.
Oh, yeah.
The transformation happened. And I was like, well, looks like the same fucking cracker to me, but...
I haven't been to a Catholic mass since I was probably 7. I should probably... Okay, that's not entirely true. I did attend... It was basically a mock mass. Priest at St. Joseph's, when I was there as a student, put on a mock mass for the students.
So
just
you didn't
for my class.
Actually turn it into...
No, it was weird. Like, he went through all the steps and explained the things, but we didn't actually do all of the thing.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So it was like mass adjacent activity. 3
funeral masses and 1 wedding mass, but they're all tied to, things I have to go to. I haven't just been to a Sunday mass.
Right.
Lots of standing, lots of kneeling, lots of sitting. Anyway, back to weird things that people believe was my point.
All right. So we are talking about people who believed in God. Most of them, including our founders, came from a Christian background. They believed in the idea that there was a God, but they were very happy to believe that he was an alien. But like several layers up through this bridge, a super alien.
Super duper alien. Yeah. So they believe that the Bible is just a story about contact with extraterrestrials, that aliens
could help.
Came to Earth, all this stuff happened, and here's the story we've gleaned from it, but it's all because of aliens.
The way Ezekiel talks about some of the things he sees in the sky, it'd be easy to say, oh yeah, UFOs, sure. The pillars of fire in the Exodus look a lot like the beams of light coming out of flying saucers picking up cows in most sci-fi movies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's easy enough to say, yeah,
this is a
aliens.
Plausible explanation.
Yeah.
I actually even think of our good friend, Dr. Glenn Aaron, who in his interview said, in some ways Scientology is more believable than Christianity because aliens aren't proven, but again, to my earlier point, very likely, as opposed to someone being resurrected from the dead. So I can see how this is a plausible explanation. Not a good explanation.
Any which way around, we're looking at stuff that's improbable and fantastical. One of the great details is Mary being abducted by aliens and impregnated in their lab, giving us Jesus.
We've all
Preserve
watched that
the
movie.
virginity.
Yeah, we've all watched that movie. Where some woman, we've all done that to our Sims. You impregnate your Sims with an alien baby. Yeah. Anyway, Telah, T-E-L-A-H, is like foundational, which is the evolutionary level above human. And this is where Preston said, like, kind of like the bridge to total freedom or whatever. In Scientology, it's all about reaching the next level. And this is a core belief in Heaven's Gate. So our bodies are just these meat vessels, and we can ascend by either dying or shedding our meat vessel or transforming into aliens and going into space. So this is how we evolutionary level above human. That's how we get there.
Yeah, given the option, I feel like assuming the aliens could surgically put my brain into a new alien body, that might be the better of the options. I don't know. It all seems rough.
Yeah, I feel like it's more of a spiritual thing than a brain thing.
Oh, it definitely is. They make that official later on.
They believe that when you reached Telah, T-E-L-A-H, you had a corporeal form, but you didn't have any of these earthly needs. Preston, no eating, no death, no food. You just got to live in happiness forever by absorbing the rays of the sun.
And no sex.
No sex. You don't need anything. You just need sun's rays and you, like a little lizard.
Yeah. We're solar-powered plant people.
And you're just happy because of it, I guess.
Happy sounds good.
Yeah, but I get a lot of pleasure from eating and sex.
Right?
So I don't know what I would do with my time if I just absorbed the sun. I don't know what would make me happy. That makes my life sound really sad. It's not. Don't worry about me. But I don't know what I would do. I don't know what would make me happy if I don't have food.
Well, that sounds like a personal journey.
That sounds like I need therapy. Oh, it's terrible.
So there are 3 different ways to get to this next level. You can hitchhike onto a Telah spacecraft and transfer to a next level body aboard that craft. You can die, and pretty much any form of death is really going to get you there. You could be murdered, martyred. You could get sick and die of old age or a disease while you're younger. Natural death will get you there too. Or you can willfully exit from your body in a dignified manner.
They compared this to Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, he was already suffering, but he did, according to the Gospels, just give up the ghost. So, fair comparison. And this sort of thinking is what led to the mass suicide. So, big bummer there. Yeah, it took them a while to figure out that last step, though. So, in the meantime, there's more story.
Perfect.
Heaven's Gate members, a group wasn't actually called this yet, but this is how you know it today. They lived a communal lifestyle as ascetics and gave up all of their material possessions to be part of the group. It's kind of like the Dharmic principle. You have to give up your material attachments to really move on, to clear your karma kind of deal. This includes the things you would expect, like wealth and family. Facial hair was also on the list. Stop being attached to facial hair.
I like men with facial hair, so I can see how that's...
Sure. I don't think the decision came from a preference sexually from our people in charge, since they were avoiding sex anyway.
Is it like a vanity thing?
Maybe.
Because I know
we are looking
sound guy / my husband looks like a toddler when he doesn't have a beard. So it could be a vanity thing.
It's quite the baby face.
He is, yeah. Good genes.
So we're looking at the late 70s, early 80s, I think, at about this point. And so we had the great porn stash.
Right.
And
classic.
I think, if I had to guess, I think the thing about facial hair may have been due to the connection between the porn stash and the porn industry and sex in general.
Okay.
That's my story right now.
All right. We're hypothesizing, everyone.
Yeah. And going even further, 8 men in this church agreed that it was a good idea to go and get castrated. And so rather than taking care of it themselves, they knew that wasn't safe. There's a lot of ways that can go poorly. They looked around for a while to find a surgeon willing to castrate them. It was a long while. This did include Marshall himself. They eventually found a fella down in Mexico who would do it. So, yay for that.
Yay for that. Followers also agreed to adopt new alien names that were hard to pronounce.
Yeah. Oh, I'm loving these names. So the rule was, I think almost all of them had to have a name that was composed of 3 random letters. I think they were always consonants. Mm-hmm. And then O-D-Y. And it was supposed to be 2 syllables altogether. So you get weird names like Rakoti and Jamodi and Lavodi.
I don't like it.
I don't like it at all. And apparently our 2 founders didn't like it a whole lot either for themselves.
So they switched names again.
Yeah. And so he was Doe and she was T.
Wow.
Yeah. Just wild.
I don't like this one.
No.
Because he was Doe and she was T.
Yeah.
So he was Guinea and she was Pig and he was Bo and he was Peep. But if you do the music thing, it goes T-Doe.
Yes, it does.
Doe-T.
Yeah.
And I don't like it. I guess you can do a scale either way, but I don't like it.
By this point, I think he had already acknowledged that she was superior to him.
Oh, okay.
Leading up to this, they were always equals. Even though she was the prophet, he was the spokesman, kind of like Moses and Aaron. I think by this point, they had acknowledged that she was the superior in the pair.
Okay, interesting.
And so instead of Bo Peep and Guinea Pig, they were
Tito, but she was first. Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, good for her.
Right?
It's all she's ever going to get.
She also gets cancer.
Oh, we'll get to that. Don't jump ahead now. In the church communes, life was strictly regimented. This is part of the Bite model. Every minute was scheduled in preparation for the coming ascension. This didn't usually include time to talk or to visit with family. And unlike typical danger cults, anyone who didn't like it was more than welcome to leave. So there was no pressure to stay or be rehabilitated back into the system.
Yeah, so it's a weird kind of pressure. Yeah, you're free to go, but you've also dumped a lot of your time and energy into these people, this community, and trying to please the leaders of this cult.
I mean,
you're not likely.
Fallacy for sure.
Absolutely. Most stayed just because they wanted the approval of their community and their leaders. But the one thing that I think is really interesting that I haven't seen other cults do is that anybody who left was given some money to help them get back on their feet.
That's interesting.
Right? Because they're genuinely trying to be good people. It's just that they're super messed up.
Yeah, and I mean, we will talk about this next episode, and we talked about this in other cult episodes, is like, do they really believe their own bullshit?
And most don't, by
I
the
would
looks
say
of
these
it.
ones do, right? If you're really willing to, like, let people go and help them leave, essentially, then you probably, I'd say you have more belief than someone trying to keep people to stay.
Yeah, this is completely different than Jim Jones and Scientology. To me, they look like they're true believers.
If you love something, Preston, you set it free.
And if it comes back, they know you're not a cult.
Or you
they do.
are a cult, and they just don't know how this is going to end yet. Spoilers!
Yeah. So eventually, after never going to Jerusalem and not being assassinated there, the two witnesses came up with a new fulfillment for their biblical prophecy that they claimed was about them. Character assassination in the media. It's a real hard spin on this to say, oh yeah, it's just metaphor, which is fair. Most of what we're reading in the Revelation of John is very heavy-handed metaphor. So when Marshall was arrested and then subsequent news scandal came out, that was enough. That was the character assassination. They didn't have to lie dead in the streets for days. Nah.
Yeah.
Right. Though after the Waco, Texas massacre, Marshall and Bonnie were both really quite afraid that their group might suffer the same fate as the Branch Davidians.
As in, like, public. What's the word I'm looking for?
But they were afraid they'd be gunned down.
Yeah, by the government, and then, like, public opinion, too.
Yeah, they were a little worried about that, too. But they were more afraid of actually just being
killed by
destroyed.
Bonnie Nettles died in 1985 of cancer. Before her death, she was staying in a hospital in Dallas, Texas, under the assumed name Shelley West.
Of all the made-up names, this one's the best.
Keep this one. Marshall had Bonnie's body cremated and scattered over a lake. He told the church that her work was done and that she had ascended, but also that she would continue to help the church. So
her work was done, but her work's not quite done.
Her nurse said taking her down. This is, again, a lot of, like, L. Ron Hubbard vibes. So, like, he didn't need his body anymore, but he didn't die because he can't.
Yeah. It's a little tricky. So this death is generally thought to have been the factor that changed the church's expectation that they would ascend bodily into the sky to catch their ride on the Great Mothership. Instead, from this point forward, Marshall referred to Bonnie as the Father, leaned hard into male pronouns and into the idea that reincarnated Christ was him, that he was the only way to the Father, and that after him there would be no succession. He was the only connection to everything that they have been trying to achieve.
I will say, I'm impressed by how often they rebrand and are still successful.
Right.
Because they're still not called Heaven's Gate at this point. So it's 1993, the church renamed to Total Overcomers Anonymous. And then in 1994 is when they adopted the name Heaven's Gate. And Marshall, started talking a lot more about how suicide was the valid form of death to accomplish this ascension.
Yeah. So you can see we're getting close to the end of the story now. He was also actually really concerned that he had cancer. Turns out it was more of a heart problem, but not cancer.
So he wasn't well. But I mean, if they started in the 70s, this is easily 20 years later. She had already had 4 kids and been married 20 years. So these people aren't young at this point.
Right.
Because let's say, hypothetically, she got married at 20, they would have met at 40, and then they spent another 20 years doing this Heaven's Gates thing. So she was easily 60. And when she passed, he was easily 60. She passed 10 years sooner. But
right.
Yeah, they're not spring chickens at this point. So
yeah. They're also big fans of Star Wars.
I mean, who isn't?
Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out in the late 70s, shortly after they'd started all this. And that also really helped them appreciate and have great new ideas about UFOs. which also ties into how this whole thing winds up.
Ooh, problematic, but
So being a sci-fi religion, a big part of what they did to gather people together was talking about UFOs at conferences and tent meetings and what have you. Kind of wild. And so they naturally brought in the curious and also anybody who had claimed to see a UFO themselves. And everybody always hoped to see more. So this is the sort of thing that would help you really strengthen your faith in this UFO religion.
I mean, yeah.
It was great. And in 1996, an image was produced by an amateur astronomer of the Hale-Bopp Comet, which was the great astronomical event of 1997, but we're not there yet.
I love, like, the Hale-Bopp Comet is real,
Yeah,
but its name just, like, fits so perfectly
sure.
with Heaven's Gate. Like, it just sounds so made up. I know it's people's last names, but
Yeah.
Hale-Bopp.
Yeah. Two
Beep
different astronomers on the
Doty.
same day noticed this comet, and so it got named after both of them, Hale and Bopp.
Bo Peep, Doty, Hale-Bopp. Like, it just all goes.
You're not wrong.
Gakoti or Gavoti. Like, it just all goes together so nice. And again, I know they have nothing to do with Heaven's Gate except for the climax, but
Right.
and that's not their fault. It's neither Hale nor Bopp's fault.
Yeah. So this comet is on its way. It was spotted in 96, and this amateur astronomer named Chuck Schramek saw in a photograph he took, or claims to have taken, this little object tailing behind the comet. And he checked all his computers and couldn't find a star in exactly this spot. Somebody else later pointed on, no, your preferences for what show up are why you didn't see the star on your chart, which is a little ridiculous. So what he described this little thing to look like was a Saturn-like object. You know, like an orb with some rings around it.
Yeah.
Which is great. UFO enthusiasts everywhere jump to the conclusion it must be a UFO, a flying saucer that is apparently really just bad at stealth. You know, if you're going to do a flyby by a planet and you're going to tail a comet, it's because you're trying to hide in its tail, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But we spotted him. We spotted him with the technology we had in the 90s.
No, I don't know how many of our listeners are 90s babies, but I sure was. And it was not great.
Yeah.
We
It's
didn't
great.
even have cell phones in the 90s, hardly.
Well, yeah, they started in the 90s.
I know,
and I mean, you had to be like, I'm a
Wealthy.
fancy businessman to have a cell phone, even at the end of the 90s.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. So it was a really exciting time. There's this thing behind this comet. So Marshall Applewhite decided that Bonnie Nettles must be on that ship, and that this is a once in a 2,000-year opportunity to make the ultimate leap of faith.
Leap of faith. I love how you've worded it.
So the mysterious item behind the comet was in fact a star that was well known to real astronomers. That's important.
There's nothing wrong with being an amateur astronomer. Just
Right.
don't make your life decisions based on that.
Yeah, if you find something new, that's cool. Bring it to the attention of real astronomers. Get yourself double checked.
Yeah. The scholarly process.
Yeah. The University of Hawaii announced that the image in question had been doctored.
Oh, wow.
And even better news, Heaven's Gate isn't the only cult to really get excited about this. There was another UFO enthusiast group led by Nancy Leader, and she was 100% sure that the comet was actually a government hoax.
Hey,
Yeah, that it was covering up a more dangerous approach of a whole planet that would spell disaster for Earth. And maybe that's worth another whole episode. At the very least, I'm going to shoot up a link on our Discord for everybody to
Yes,
see what's going
please.
on there. Nancy allegedly got this information from aliens who had implanted something into her brain.
have humans always been this fucking weird?
This level of weird, yes.
Okay.
This specific flavor, I feel like this is just the last couple hundred years.
Perfect. So trigger warning, we're going to get into some details of the mass suicide that finally ended. It didn't even end the Heaven's Gate cult. We'll touch on that too.
Close.
So the mass suicide occurred over the course of 3 days between March 22nd and March 26, 1997. Authorities received an anonymous tip on March 26, which is why the dates of death are, because that is more than a 3-day range.
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate members consumed pudding or applesauce laced with phenobarbital and then put plastic bags on their heads to suffocate themselves.
I feel like that's too many steps.
I just that's commitment. I would do, not suicidal. I would do the poison because you basically just go to sleep. But to suffocation is a real, that's not pleasant.
Well, that's why you're asleep for it, right?
I guess so, but just take poison.
Yeah, just take a more potent poison and just be done with it.
And then you don't have to go through the unpleasantness of suffocation.
I mean, our folks in Jonestown had at least that part figured out.
Right. After death, members would come and remove the bags of the deceased, arrange them on their beds, and cover them with a purple cloth. 2 members were found with bags on their heads and no purple cloth, and these were the last 2 to die.
Makes sense.
In total, 39 people died over the course of these 3 days, making it the largest mass suicide on American soil, which is different from Jonestown, which was not on American soil, though it was one of the largest losses of American life next to 9/11. And Jonestown is a mass murder because nobody wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Which, hearing about all the other stuff, clearly this was willing.
Yeah, because suicide...
So not a great choice, but...
Suicide was a now approved way to make it onto the mothership.
Whereas if you watch horrifying videos of Jonestown, everyone was resisting.
Yeah.
And if you didn't drink the Kool-Aid or Flavor Aid, you were shot. So
it was Flavor Aid, not Kool-Aid.
Yes. Kool-Aid doesn't like that. 8 members were asked to stay behind on Earth to continue Heaven's Gate's efforts. Their website was live up until 2017. Needless to say, the mass suicide really did hamper the growth of any, furthering the group. Right.
Yeah.
Nobody joined after. So their website, while live for 20 years, did not do...
That's the way it goes sometimes. You get a bunch of bad press and nobody wants to join your club anymore.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to kill yourself to become an alien, it's just not... There isn't a mass market appeal to that.
Right.
Yeah. But you know what does have a mass market appeal, Preston?
Nike. Nike already does not love that we're talking about them in this episode.
That's fine. You know what? We're going to just make a lot of people angry in the next couple weeks. And
that's fair.
Nike can be one of them. I will frame a cease and desist from Nike. So all of the deceased members of the cult were wearing identical outfits, but in particular, they were all wearing the same pair of Nike Decades. So they got them for a really good deal. I found a quote that makes no sense, but the quote from one of the living members and said the Nike Decades was a discontinued line, though they were actually still in production at this time. So the shoe store manager said he could come up with a great deal for 40 pairs of shoes at a good price, which is great for aesthetic living. And we shopped around and found his deal to be the best in relation to the kind of shoe we wanted.
I mean, they were comfortable shoes, right?
So they got 40 pairs of Nike Decades, and everyone dressed the same. So I think it was black top and bottom, and then these Nike Decades. And so the morbid backstory makes Nike Decades an incredibly sought after and expensive pair of shoes to buy. Nike quietly pulled all the remaining Decades from the store after the story broke, and you can find pairs of Nike Decades. One article I said quoted about $6,000 to get a pair of Nike Decades.
That's wild. So I often get distracted by all of the things while doing research for these episodes.
Fair. There's lots, yeah.
And I definitely spent a little bit of time looking up an article on how to restore a pair of Nike Decades.
Wow. I also read, I didn't put it in the show notes, but we'll talk about it, and I honestly think this is actually quite in poor taste, if you compare it to Jonestown.
Sure.
But Saturday Night Live did a sketch on this, and I too soon for sure.
Right.
I'm happy to laugh about all this stuff, and they kind of played on the idea of just do it, as in like offing yourself. But
Oh, no.
apparently, Heaven's Gate had just do it, as in dough and tea. They actually used it, just do it.
Wow.
As like a catchphrase. So yeah, pretty problematic.
Yeah.
For a lot of
I hadn't even made that connection. Just do it. Oh, that's rough.
just do it and then just do it, as in like
Yeah. Oh, bad times.
bad time. Ta-da! Heaven's Gate.
Yeah, so online sources say that there are still 2 members of this church left. Man, I would love to talk to one of them.
Yeah, and they maintain the website for the last 20 years.
Right.
Yeah, I read some kind of like little interviews with them where they like don't bring it up, but their close friends know that they're, I want to say a part of it, because there's nothing to be a part of anymore.
Now they're just off-brand Christian UFO enthusiasts?
Yeah.
Well, who knows where they're at? I want to know. I want to talk to them.
Well,
If we're lucky, you, our devoted listeners, will get in on that action.
yeah, you know, someone who knows them. Yeah. It's a weird one because it really doesn't have any danger cult.
I mean, yeah, there was that weird control-y bit where they scheduled everybody's days and made it a little bit inconvenient to go and visit families. But it was never like you're not allowed to make contact with people. They had strict schedules, and they would later on say, okay, you need to go visit your families now because you haven't been, because we haven't been scheduling it. That's about it. I mean, if these people were well adjusted and connected to their families properly, I'm sure they would have made a point of just making the time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know either.
But
Belief is a wild thing, Preston.
it sure is. And, well, I'll say it for the 3rd time in this episode. I'm sure that Bonnie and Marshall were true believers through and through to the very end. They just read a lot of weird stuff that led them to believe some really weird stuff.
Yeah.
And then got a little bit weird with authority, but I mean, we've seen people get a lot worse.
Yeah. Slappy. Yeah. That's all I got. In summary, aliens are real. You will not become one by killing yourself.
Yeah. Those are hard facts.
Hard fact.
Yeah. If you want to talk about it more, maybe share with the rest of our audience some things that you know that we haven't brought up today, share it on our Discord, or we're also on Facebook and Instagram, where we have all kinds of great little tidbits of knowledge. And we're on YouTube. We've also got Patreon and our Patreon and Spreadshirt, where we've got all kinds of opportunities for you to give us money in exchange for goods and or services.
Yes, and we will not put you on a spaceship.
Promise.
Promise.
Thanks for joining us.
Peace be with you.
By the late Middle Ages, the Christian prophecies had fulfilled itself.